Hi, I'm Callie and welcome to my kitchen. Tonight I'm doing another one of my gourmet budget meals. It's another chicken and rice dinner, but using the 4 tips that I showed you in my last video, which was a hibachi style stir-fried chicken and rice dinner. I'm going to show you how to take those same 4 tips, switch up the flavors a little, change the cooking method, and make a completely different dinner. Again, the ingredients for this are about $10 or $11. I am using boneless, skinless chicken thighs that I'm thawing under cold running water. This week it's actually about $2.80 to $3.80 a pound, depending on where you are. So my same ingredients cost a little bit more for this video, but I still got all the base stuff for $11. I'm using almost the exact same fresh vegetables. Instead of a green bell pepper, this week I have some fresh zucchini, carrots, broccoli, garlic, and onions. So my fresh vegetables are still about $4. I've got my boneless, skinless chicken thawing under cold running water because food regulations say cold running water. While I get my chicken thawed, I'm going to go ahead and get my vegetables prepped, and then we'll be back. I've got my chicken thawed and my veggies prepped. My first tip for making any budget meal, a gourmet budget meal, is to stop buying seasonings that are mostly salt. Look at the back of your favorite seasoning. It's usually mostly salt, and then a couple of seasonings, usually only 3 or 4. When you buy the individual seasonings, a lot of times they're only $1 a piece. This is $1.12 at Walmart. This one has no salt, but it has marjoram, oregano, thyme, rosemary, savory, basil, and sage, all in one. I've seen these sometimes for 50 cents at places like Piggly Wiggly. But when you're using just a seasoning and not a bunch of salt, you can control the amount of salt you have and add a lot more flavor without having to worry about your food being too salty. In the last chicken and rice meal, the hibachi style stir-fry chicken and rice, I used mostly onion, garlic, and paprika. Tonight, I'm going to use this Italian seasoning, onion powder, garlic powder, and a little cayenne for some heat. And for this meal, I'm going to pretty much play with those flavors throughout the whole meal. I'm using boneless, skinless chicken thighs tonight. Chicken thighs is usually one of the cheapest boneless things you can get, but this meal also works with bone-in chicken thighs. Those I have seen for $2.20 a pound, but the prices really vary on the meat. But when you're using chicken, especially if you're using chicken breast, it doesn't have a lot of flavor. But that brings me to my second tip. Marinate your meat. Even if you're using beef is going to taste better if you marinate it. And if you're having to use a cheap cut of beef, it will be more tender when you marinate it. Every good marinade has 3 basic ingredients. An acid, which can be vinegar, an alcohol, or even a citrus juice, and a fat. It doesn't have to be olive oil. It could be anything as cheap as bacon grease. Play with the flavors and make different marinades and different seasonings. Third important part of your marinade is your seasoning. And tonight, I'm switching it up from the last meal by adding Italian seasoning. I'm using 2 pounds of meat. So I'm going to add about a tablespoon of this Italian seasoning. Remember, this is 7 different herbs. Some onion powder. This is roasted garlic powder, but garlic powder will work fine. And just a little bit of cayenne. You can omit the cayenne. When I was first learning or experimenting with herbs and spices and marinades, I liked to smell the meat. Since you can't taste raw chicken, I always like to smell the way it smells with the meat. And I go by my nose. I know a lot of people can't do that, but if you're looking at your favorite seasonings that you've been using and look at the ingredients that are on those, you're going to be pretty close to what you want. I'm going to use olive oil because that's the flavor that I'm using tonight. You don't have to use olive oil. Last week's video, I used peanut oil. You can use whatever oil you have in the house or the flavor that you like. Olive oil is a little more expensive than some, but since I'm only using a couple of tablespoons of it here and there, I'm not using $7 worth of olive oil. I'm only using maybe $1 altogether. I do need salt in this one since this is not a marinade with soy sauce. And tonight I'm using the red wine vinegar. Hopefully I have enough for the whole thing. This one I actually found at Walmart. I think the organic was a penny more than the regular, but it's about $2.27 a bottle. Again, none of these are set. Play with the flavors. And you really just need enough to cover the meat in whatever vessel that you're marinating the meat in. A lot of times I use a Ziploc bag. I'm out of those, so I'm using this bowl. I just need to stir the meat up. Last time I cubed the meat because I only had 20 or 30 minutes to marinate it. I don't have a lot of time to marinate it tonight, but because I'm going to actually cook it in the marinade this time because I'm roasting it in the oven, it really doesn't need as long. If you were starting with thawed chicken, you could get this marinating, covered it in the refrigerator and marinating before you do your vegetable prep. But since it's me, I thawed it while I did my vegetable prep. I'm going to get this covered and in the refrigerator, and then I can start my rice. Because I'm using brown rice, my rice is going to take a lot longer than everything else. Now that my chicken's put up and everything's been cleaned up from the raw chicken, I'm going to start my rice. I'm using brown rice because I want to fill everybody up as much as possible, and I find that the extra fiber in it really does hold us off for a lot longer. I'm going to use 2 cups, or pretty much the rest of the bag from before. I found rice for about $1.60 a bag, or $1.62 I think, which makes it about 80 cents to feed my 6. I've got my pan preheated on a medium high, but with the rice, it brings me to my third tip, which is to use stock. Whether that's stock you've made, a box of stock, or even some Better Than bouillon. I'm using Better Than bouillon because it fits both the amount of time I have lately with 2 children under 2, the amount of space I have to store things, and the cost, which helps with cost in the meals. Since this is a little over $4 a jar, and this is 38 servings per jar, it's pennies instead of $3 a box for stock. I'm going to use the same fat that I used in my marinade, my olive oil. I'm going to put about a tablespoon into the pan, or the pot in this case. It's preheated. I used a little bit of garlic. It's about 4 ounces of garlic, or a quarter of a pound. I'm using about onion. I'm using about 4 ounces of onion. Onion, not garlic. About 4 ounces of onion. I'm going to saute that in. It already smells nice. I'm going to, normally I would sprinkle salt at this point, but because I am using this Better Than bouillon, I'm not going to salt it actually. This is not reduced sodium, so it's very easy to get things too salty when you're using this. I'm just going to get a little color on that, if you can see that. I'm going to add a little bit of my garlic. I'm going to add the rice in. And then I'm going to add a little more oil because I just want enough oil to coat this rice. It doesn't have to cover the rice, just to coat it a little. And this is one of the few times I'm going to mix some of the Better Than bouillon with water before I just add it in. You can use a white wine, but I'm going to use the acid that I'm using in my marinade with my chicken and use pretty much the same flavors across. And if you can see how much I have left to how much I started with, I really didn't use very much vinegar at all for the whole meal. I just used the directions on the back of the bag. Since all rice is different, the rice I'm using calls for 2 cups of rice and 5 cups of water. I'm going to use 5 cups of stock. Once I bring it to a boil, I'm going to turn it down to a simmer, put the lid on, and set the timer for 45 minutes. Tip number 4 is use fresh vegetables. I really like zucchini. This is one of my favorite ways to make zucchini. This is roasted zucchini. All I've done is washed a zucchini, cut off the ends, and sliced it. With those slices, I'm gonna add a little salt, a little garlic powder, and a little olive oil. You mix it to coat them, then spread it out even. Where it's one layer. You can use the pre-shredded Parmesan if you'd like, but I found this. It's about $5 at Walmart. I've only shredded the very end of this to get that much cheese, It winds up being about twice per ounce as the pre-shredded, but I find that when I shred just a little bit and we sprinkle it on top, it makes things look a little fancier, and my kids will actually use less of this. This is a lot saltier than this. But I'm just going to sprinkle it onto my zucchini. I'm going to save some for the other side. I pop this into a 400-degree preheated oven. After a few minutes, it'll brown, and I'm going to flip it all over and sprinkle the cheese on the other side, and then cook it to my desired tenderness. You can have it tender, or you can have it crispy like zucchini chips. My rice is simmering, so I'm going to turn it down. I've got a timer set for 45 minutes, so I'm going to get my chicken and vegetables going. Okay, I have the rice on the working burner now, so I'm going to start my chicken and my vegetables. This is a lot simpler method because I'm really going to roast everything. I'm going to roast the chicken with some of the vegetables, but then some of the vegetables I like roasted separate where they're real dry and wind up kind of crispy. I'm going to do a bed of onions. I'm going to break these up some. I just cut an onion in half and then sliced it. And my carrots. This was about a half a pound of carrots. And once again, I have carrots on the floor. My chicken tonight, I left in whole, boneless, skinless chicken thigh pieces. And I'm going to just pop it on top. It was 2 cups of rice. I've got 2 pounds of chicken because I'm feeding 6 people. It's going to be 8 servings, but 6 people. And I'm just going to pour the marinade on top. Remember, I didn't have as long to marinate it tonight, and I want all that flavor in there. So I can just cook it with it. And I'm going to put my chicken in my 400-degree preheated oven. I'm going to get my broccoli going, but I'm going to bake my chicken for about 20 minutes, and then I'll check it. I put my onions and my carrots in with my chicken to roast them. But my broccoli, I like roasted a little different. These, I've washed and cut. I've got pretty big pieces. I'm going to put them on the pan. I'm going to use a little bit of garlic powder. A little bit of salt. I'm going to use a little pepper. And a little olive oil. Just a drizzle. And you can toss it around to coat it. You could spray it if you'd like. I'm going to spread this out into a single layer and pop this in a 400-degree preheated oven. Keep an eye on it. I like mine still a little crisp. This way it has a nice crisp from roasting it on the pan, and it will be a little tender, but not mush. Forgot to put the garlic on top of my chicken. I usually do enough to go in everything, but some of them I've actually used garlic powder. I think it'll give it a little crisp to be on top of this. Got onions hiding back there. I'm going to pop this in the oven for a few minutes. I'm going to set a timer for about 20 minutes. I like to roast the chicken, and then the vegetables don't take very long, and everything will still be done before the rice. So I'm going to pop chicken in. I'm actually going to go sit down for a little while. So I've got everything done. My rice cooked for 45 minutes, and then I let it rest. While my rice is going, I put my chicken in the oven with my onions and carrots, and then the chicken and the marinade on top with the garlic. Put that in a preheated 400-degree oven. I did 20 minutes, and then I flipped all of the chicken over and stirred the vegetables a little, popped it back in for another 20 minutes. While I was cooking those, I did the zucchini, which I just threw in a little olive oil, garlic powder, and some salt. Cooked it for 10 minutes, flipped it, and then you can sprinkle the Parmesan on at that point, or you can put the Parmesan to begin with. I did do the Parmesan because I wanted it on both sides, but it did stick to the pan just a little, and it's a little crispy on the other side, which I'm not going to mind, but you might not want it. Everyone might not want it that crispy, but they are zucchini chips. The broccoli, once the chicken was done, the broccoli only took about 5 minutes. Rinse the broccoli, cut it, drizzled it with olive oil, garlic powder, some salt, spread it out flat on the pan, put it in a 400-degree preheated oven for about 5 minutes, flipped it all over, popped it in for a few more minutes. It really doesn't take long at all. You're going to get that nice char on it just in a few minutes, and they're tender. So at this point, I'm just going to fix the plate. I'm just going to fix it really simple tonight. I've got the bed of rice, a piece of chicken, I'm going to do my carrots and onions on it. All that actually doubles as my sauce. You could use a little bit of the shake Parmesan cheese or just a tiny bit of shredded Parmesan, freshly shredded Parmesan. A little bit goes a long way to make it look really fancy. So we've got a bed of brown rice, our roasted onions and carrots, our Italian seasoned roasted chicken thighs, roasted broccoli. It's got a nice char on it and it's still tender, and our zucchini chips. And that's how I do my gourmet roasted chicken and rice dinner. And just a little bit of Parmesan cheese on top to make it feel a little fancy. So my carrots, I did wind up cooking until they were tender. But they're fork tender, but still have a little crunch. Lots of flavor in that rice. You're gonna like the chicken thighs. But my favorite part is the zucchini chips. They have a little crisp on one side, which I actually like. That has a good flavor. If you like that video and you haven't already, go ahead and give us that thumbs up. Hit subscribe if you hadn't already, and I hope to have more out to you soon. I want to hear some of your budget meals, or your favorite budget meal that maybe you'd like to see as a gourmet budget meal. In the meantime, it's dinner time here. Y'all have a good one. Y'all watch out, let's eat.